So I'm just going to say a quick welcome and just hand it right over to Patrick. He's from NFP, which is the company that's been helping us get this 401k started. So he's making himself very available both today, and if you can't stay today but you'd like to chat with him, he's going to give you all this information so that you can set that up if you'd like. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so Patrick Gilson here, and I'm an advisor with NFP Retirement. So is this everyone's first 401k? Have you had 401ks in the past? So, okay, if this is your first one, it might be a lot of new information. If you've had one before, it might be a refresher with a few tidbits of new information in there. But as we get started, kind of what I always like to say is there's kind of three groups when it comes to the 401k plan. So there's Home Instead, who's the plan sponsor, and they're the one who are providing the plan to you. There's also Newport Group. Newport Group is known as the custodian or the record keeper. Think about, if you have a bank account through Chase or Huntington or Ohio Savings Bank, think of Newport Group as almost the Chase for your retirement account. So they're the ones actually holding the money. They're the ones keeping, track of the transactions going in, transactions going out, the investment pieces. So they're, one of the largest companies that handles these plans. We work with them and they're great. We'll touch a little bit more on how you can get into contact with them, set up your account. And then of course there's us, NFP. So we're the advisor on the plan, but what does that really mean? So we're registered investment advisors, and we can help you out with a whole myriad of different topics. So we're here talking about the 401k primarily today. We are the advisor on the 401k, but we can help you out with investment reviews and advice, overall financial well-being, debt repayment, estate planning, savings and retirement calculations, and everything in between. So again, while we're here on the 401k, and on the 401k, what I like to say is kind of our role is a fiduciary on the plan. So we're here and we are required to act in the best interest of all the plan participants. So we're a fiduciary on the plan, and we're really here to help make sure that you are developing a balanced financial plan. But when it comes to the Home Instead plan, there are a couple eligibility criteria. And so that is having 1 year of service. Now, a year of service is defined as working 1,000 hours in a 12-month period. So for anybody who's not doing like a full 40-hour work week, that comes out to about 20 hours a week. So somewhere in that range can get you to that 1,000 hours in a 12-month period. And you also have to be over the age of 18 to participate. Now, once you meet those eligibility criteria, you will enter into the plan quarterly. So what I mean by that is, let's say you met the eligibility criteria February 1st. Well, then the next quarter is when you would enter the plan. So that would be April 1st. I know we're throwing a lot of dates out there right now. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Newport Group. We can take a look at your account, review it, let you know when we think you're going to be about eligible to participate. The other thing too, if you've met that eligibility criteria, so for example, if you're on pace to work 1,000 hours in a 12-month period and you're over age 18, as of right now, and you were hired before July 1st of 2022, then you will enter the plan right away when it starts on January 1st of this year. So as long as you were hired before July 1st of 2022 and you've met you're on pace to meet that 1,000 hours, you'll start up right away in January. Now, that's kind of the eligibility piece. From another thing as well is not only is Home Instead offering this plan to you as a benefit, but they're also offering a company match on top of that. So the company match formula is 25% of what you put in up to 6% of your compensation. So that's just a fun way with percentages to say for every dollar that you're putting in this account, Home Instead is going to put in 25 cents. So each dollar you put in, a total of $1.25 is going into the account up until 6% of your compensation. Now you can put away more than 6% of your pay. However, anything that you put in above 6% is not going to get matched. So we'll talk a little bit about calculating your goal in retirement, figuring out how much you need to put away to meet your retirement goals. But a great place to start would be that if you are able to, everyone's budget is differently, and we can send over resources on budgeting, talk through that if you want to sit down individually. But if it's within your budget, we would always recommend doing at least 6% into the account. Because if you're doing anything less than 6%, you're kind of leaving free money on the table, right? If I came up to you and said, hey, for every dollar you give me, I will give you $1.25 back right now, you'd probably give me all the money you can, because, right, you're getting a 25% profit right away. So that's kind of what the match is, up to 6%. Now, the one thing when it comes to the match, and this is specifically only to the matching money that goes into your account, this has nothing to do with the money that you put in, is what's known as a vesting schedule. So a vesting schedule refers to how much money you get to take with you if you were to, say, go find another job, or, I think the Mega Millions as of today is up to like $430 million is the grand prize. If you win that and you say, I'm done working. The vesting schedule applies to the company money. And so what this 5-year graded means is that you need to work for 5 years in order to be fully 100% vested in the company match. So if you were to only work for 3 years, you would not get to keep all of the company match. Now that graded piece means that it's going to be split up over 5 years, 20% each year. So after 1 year of working for Home Instead, you'll be able to keep 20% of the match that's in your account. If you worked for 3 years, you get to keep 60, 4 years, 80. So just think about it that way. And again, this only applies to the company match, not the money that you put in, right? The money you put in, that's yours. You get to keep it no matter what happens. Any questions on that before we pivot over to talk about Newport Group and their site?
Go ahead. You go ahead. So the 5-year graded, which is fine. So let's say if you worked a year, do you keep what they keep for the year, or you just lose that?
Yeah, great question. So you would, the entire match would be in there. So you don't lose that.
Okay.
That's only if you were to separate. So that's a great question.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just saying that, for example, let's say you're here for 3 years and there's about $1,000 of company match in your account, and then you were to leave, then they would just basically say, hey, you were 60% vested, there was $1,000 of company match, so you keep 60% of it, $600. And then the other $400 would be forfeited back to the plan.
Okay.
For them to use to pay fees or stuff like that. So that's kind of how it works. But it's not something where, you've only been here for 1 year, so you only get 20% of 25%. So yeah, so it's all the matches in there, and then that only applies if you were to separate your employment over 5 years.
No, I just had a question about the match. I know, like you say, put 6% in. Some people, are you guys able, like when some people put in 25% or even 15%, how often are they allowed to change
Great question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
is it like they can change it every
So
day?
you can go in and you could enter and you could change how much is coming out of your paycheck whenever you would like to. Now, how it all works is kind of behind the scenes. So the payroll company is going to be connected with Newport Group. And so really what's going to happen is that as you make changes on the Newport Group website, it's going to be communicated to payroll, and then they'll put it into effect. So the only reason I bring that up is that if you make a change, it might be a paycheck or two for it to actually
it's
go into
effective.
effect.
'Cause
Yeah.
That's what I was asking, because like I'd had 20%, but I was working a lot of overtime, so I was able to try to play catch up. But let's just say someone has to cut their hours, they want to change it instead of 20%, down to like the 6%.
Right.
You're able to change it as often.
You're able to
as you
change
want.
it as often as you
Okay.
want. Yeah, there's no rule that like you have to change it, or it's not something where you can only change it once a year.
Once a year,
or once
okay,
a
yeah,
quarter, or
that's-
anything like that. No, you can submit the changes whenever you'd like.
It just
It
takes some
just
time.
might take a week or a paycheck or two to actually see it represented
Okay.
on your next paycheck. So yeah, it's unfortunately not a super immediate process, but you
Yeah.
can change it whenever you want.
Okay.
Perfect. Any other questions on any of this stuff? No, these have been great questions. So, and it's actually a nice segue too. So I mentioned the company Newport Group. So again, they're the custodian, they're the vendor of the plan. So that's where you would go to access your account. And if you're going to be eligible for when the plan starts, January 1st of 2023, this is actually where you can go and get set up and get enrolled so money starts coming out. If you are going to be eligible and you would like money to start right away, I would encourage you to do this as soon as you can. And then again, I'm going to be here after this meeting where we can sit down and go through it. The website, it's also on the front of that flyer, but that is newportgroup.com. And we'll have some screenshots in a second, but they've got a great website, so you can go on there, review your account balance, investment performance, update how much is coming out of your paycheck, change your investments, change your, get tax forms, statements, whatever you need. It's all on the website. It's a very good website and a great, easy to use interface. Now, the first time you access it, your username is going to be your social security number, no dashes, so just the numbers, all 9 of them. And then your password is going to be date of birth, and it's specifically in the 2 digits for month, 2 digits for day, 4 digits for year format. So, if you're born on March 1st, you want to put 0301.31. You can also give Newport Group a call. That's their phone number right there, 844-749-9981. It'll have you enter your social security number just so you can pull up your account for the representative. And you'll listen to the menu, select an option. And for the first time you call on the phone, it might ask for a PIN. If it does ask for a PIN, your PIN is your date of birth. But I mentioned I have some screenshots of the website, so when you first get logged in, it might be a different picture of somebody else smiling. I know they kind of have a rotating, the picture changes every 10 seconds, so when I grabbed the screenshot, it was this lady. But when you get to newportgroup.com, up in the top right up there, there's going to be a login button. You would hit that, and then from the drop-down window, you would select the participant access. So that is the correct login kind of window. Again, you would enter your social security number and your date of birth, and then your first time setup, it's going to have you do, stuff where you change your username and password, so it's not your personal identification. You get to enroll in 2-factor authentication, review contact information, all the fun account setup. But then, once you're in the website, it's time to get enrolled. So you're going to be presented with 2 different options for enrollment. On the left, there's a quick enroll. Really all that is you would select the percentage you want coming out of each paycheck, hit enroll, and you get started up there. From an investment side of things, they're going to put you in what's known as the default fund, which we'll talk a little bit more about them in a little bit, but those are known as target date funds. So if you went to quick enroll, it would be pre-tax contributions at whatever percentage you select going into the default investment option. The other option you have down in the bottom right, hitting Let's Get Started, that would be do-it-yourself enrollment. That's where you can customize things a little bit more. And so you would get to select, a little bit more contribution-wise. You would get to select your investments, set up your beneficiary on the account, which always important to set up your beneficiary. For those of you who are unaware, setting your beneficiary gives you control over who would inherit your account if something were to happen to you. Now, if you are married, your spouse is required to be your 100% primary beneficiary unless they sign off on a form that says, I'm fine not being the beneficiary. And so then you can have other people be the beneficiary. You can also set up a contingent beneficiary. So that would be if something were to happen to, unfortunately, you and whoever is set up as the primary beneficiaries on your account, it would then pass the contingents. Yep. So think about, primary, whoever you have as your primary beneficiaries have primary first access. But if for some reason none of the primary beneficiaries can take possession of the account, it would then go to contingent. So,
Kids are, okay.
yep. So you could always do, if you are married, you can do spouse, and then kids as contingent. If you're not, you can do, kids as your primary, and then siblings or parents as contingent. So really whatever you would like. But I know I mentioned it a few times and talking about, hey, how do we know how much to contribute? We talked about changing contributions. So before diving into that, any questions on the Newport Group site? I would say the only other thing is if you ever run into some troubleshooting issues, let me know. I'm in that site every day. So I've gotten pretty familiar with it. And if you're ever looking to get something done on there and you're like, I don't know how to do it, give me a call. I should probably know how to do it or can help you work through getting it done. But when we're talking about how much to contribute to the account, right? We talked about the match and we said, hey, sometimes you might need to contribute more in order to get us to those goals. Or hey, kind of talk about changing our contributions. Well, how do we figure out how much to contribute to your retirement account? It all starts with calculating a goal. And what I like to say is if we're running a race and we don't know where the finish line is, how do we know if we're on pace to finish in a personal record or first, second? Well, if we're saving for retirement but we don't know what our goal is, how do we know if we're saving enough? How do we know if we're on track? So this is meant to be a general calculation as a kind of starting base point. We'll talk through some stuff. So as a general goal, get a baseline goal, we want to take our current salary and multiply it by 10. So if our salary is $30,000, goal would be to have $300,000 in retirement. The other thing too is, there's that pesky thing called inflation. And so, right, hey, if we're not retiring for 15 years, our goal is $300,000, but $300,000 is not going to go as far 15 years from now as it will now, right? I mean, I think it took me $20 to get a half tank of gas. I'm sure in 15 years it'll be $100 for a half tank. Plenty of inflation calculators online. And so you can just type in inflation calculator, you'll find plenty of sites, and you can type in and say, hey, if I need $300,000 in 2022 dollars, but I don't need it till 2030 or 2040, you can enter in that information. It'll spit out exactly how much future dollars you would need to be equivalent of $300,000 today for whatever your goal is. Now, I know I mentioned this is a baseline goal, and you want to customize it, and for example, my father has finished about every single house project in his house. And I think I was talking to him over Thanksgiving break, and he said, I don't want to work in corporate America anymore, but there's no way I can stop working. I'm just going to be too bored. So, he's thinking about getting a job at a hardware store or doing some kind of home project contracting on the side. So if you're doing something like that, if you have other forms of income, whether it's rental properties or one of those side hustles, we might not need to have the full 10 times our salary saved up. Because, hey, we're not going to be drawing solely from the retirement account in retirement. We're going to have other sources of income. Similarly, if we're saying, hey, I want to work until I'm 70 or 72, instead of retiring at the normal retirement age of like 66 or 67, depending on your date of birth, we also probably don't need to have as much saved up because we're not going to be drawing on the account as long. On the flip side, you're saying, hey, I want to be done at age 60, and then I want to travel the world for 3 years, and then come back and buy a nice beachfront property, and then retire and live the rest of my life playing golf or shopping or whatever. You probably need to have more saved up. So when it comes to calculating your goal, we can help you do that. And also, if we're sitting here and we're saying, we don't know, or this is our first account, we're going to be retiring soon. There are definitely other ways that we can look at making sure that you get to a retirement that is satisfying without necessarily having to have, $300,000 or $1 million in your account. So some of the other strategies we talk about is, for example, hey, when should we take Social Security? This might be our first account and we're just now saving, we want to retire in 3 years. Well, odds are we're probably not over 3 years going to get this account up to $300,000 or $500,000 or $1 million. But, well, do we use this account? Do we put as much money in as we can? And then maybe we live off of it and delay Social Security. So when it comes to reaching goals in retirement, we can definitely personalize them. This is meant to be, a very basic goal, kind of just get you started. But always feel free to reach out and we can, make recommendations, talk through the goal. Additionally, it's always important to take a step back and realize that small changes can have, big impacts in retirement. So for example, if you're 35 and you want to retire at 65 and you're making about $40,000 and you decide, I'm just going to bump up my contribution rate by 1%, well, every 2 weeks you would have $13 less per paycheck. But in retirement, that would be about $47,000 extra in your account. So now, I know we just kind of talked about goal setting. Not everybody has 30 years in front of them. But again, even small changes can be,
Let's just calculate my age. Right.
But no, but even if we don't have 30 years, small changes can still have big impacts in retirement. So, what I like to say is, there's, on the first floor of our office, there's a coffee place that I go to every morning when I walk in. It's $2, and I'm like, that's about $10 a week that I spend on coffee there. And it's, one of those things where, hey, is it $10 on coffee, or should I just use the drip machine that's in our office that costs me nothing and bump it up? So we can always talk through where, hey, how can we find ways to even contribute 1% more? Because that can have pretty big impacts in retirement.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned Social Security. So does Social Security take part of your report?
It does not, no. No. So Social Security is not going to impact is separate from your retirement account.
Okay.
So, the amount that you're going to receive in your Social Security check doesn't get impacted by how much is in your retirement account. So think of them as two separate accounts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Money out chicken, I think we could tell
Yeah. Any other questions before one final piece when it comes to contributing to your account is Roth versus traditional contributions. Has anyone heard the difference between the two?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to take a stab at,
Well, I originally, when I first set up my first 401k, I didn't really know that much about it, so I did the traditional. But then I was talking to other people, and to my sister, and she was like, well, if you do the traditional, and when you go to retire, you think, oh, okay, I have $300,000 in there. But then you think you're getting that money, it's actually, they tax you on it. It's where you put it in, it's Roth. They tax you and you put it in, so when you retire, you have 300,000. You really have 300,000.
If you do Roth.
If you do Roth. If you do traditional, you have 300,000, and then they tax you. So they don't have as much as you thought. Is that right?
Right, you're
Okay.
exactly right. Yep. So traditional, also sometimes referred to pre-tax, exactly what you're saying. So how that works is, think about your paycheck. What comes out first, right? Taxes and other deductions. Well, if you're contributing pre-tax, that means the money's coming out before taxes, right? So your paycheck's $1,000, and let's say you're putting $100 in here. That $100 would come out before any taxes. Your paycheck is now, from an income tax perspective, only $900. So you would pay taxes on $900, and you would save, and you wouldn't owe taxes on that $100. That money's going to go in the account, it'll be invested, it'll grow. And let's say, when you retire, kind of to your point exactly, that $100 has grown into $300. Well, now when you pull that money out, you have to pay the taxes on what you put in and all the earnings, because the government is sitting there and they're saying, hey, you didn't pay taxes on that, it's time to pay up. Roth, sometimes referred to as after tax, works the exact opposite. So you get your paycheck of $1,000 and you're putting in $100. Well, taxes are going to come out first on $1,000, then your $100 is going to come out. So that $100 has already been taxed, and you're not going to be taxed on it again.
Yeah, so when you retire, what's in there is really all yours.
Yep. And so then the one thing too, just about Roth, so you're aware. So let's say again, same situation, $100 grows into $300 by the time you retire. In order to get the earnings on that money out tax-free, you have to wait until you're older than 59 and a half to take it. And it has to have been 5 years since the first time you contributed Roth.
Wait, so you have to be 59 years of age,
Yeah.
59 and a half, and 5 years.
5 years from the first Roth contribution. So for example, if you make your first Roth contribution to the account January 10th of 2022, then even if you turn 59 and a half in 2023, you would have to wait until 2027 in order to take the Roth money out, in order to get the earnings on that money out tax-free. So there's just kind of that 5-year rule that comes into play. But yeah, so great points. In retirement, it's nice because the account balance you see there is truly yours and no taxes have to come out. Now, one thing too, just so you are all aware, the company match, that's always going to be pre-tax money. So even if you are contributing Roth, or you're still going to get matched on it. So if you did 6% Roth, you would still get the full company match. Your money would be Roth, the company's money would be pre-tax. So when you pull it out in retirement, you're going to have to pay taxes on the company's money. So, yeah, so that's just one thing. So the Roth versus traditional only impacts what comes out of your paycheck. But yeah, so generally the next question that naturally tends to come up is, well, Roth versus pre-tax, which one should I do? Really, it's an individual discussion that we can have and recommendation. Some people will say, like, hey, you always want to pay taxes at your lowest rate, which, that's good advice. I don't want to try and tell you what tax rates are going to be 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, 1 year down the line, because those can always change. What we like to say is when it comes to making the decision between Roth and pre-tax, one thing that we always want to look at is how much time do you have before you need to start taking the money out. Because the longer you have before you're going to have to start withdrawing funds, the more valuable Roth is going to be because you have more time for the money to grow tax-free. Right? If we go back a slide, in this situation, they're going to be putting in $13 every 2 weeks. So that's an extra $100 for 30 years, and it's going to grow into $40,000. So it's potentially, I'm doing my math right, $250 a year over 30 years. That's like $7,500.
We can get like these sheets.
Yeah. So the presentation's going to be recorded. It'll be sent out to everybody. Okay. But I guess where I'm kind of going with why we say the more time you have is right. So they're going to put in approximately, if my mental math is correct, which for the camera it might not be, about $7,500 extra dollars by bumping up 1% over the course of 30 years. Well, that $7,500 is going to grow into $50,000 in this situation. So in that case, there's $40,000 of growth. So that's where Roth can become really valuable because, hey, that's potentially $40,000 of growth you don't have to pay a single dime of taxes on with Roth. So that's why when we say which one makes the most sense, it really comes down to how long do you have before you need to start taking the money out. Now that being said, depending on your situation, and notice how I said how long until you need to start taking the money out, not necessarily how long until you retire. So for example, even if you were going to retire in 6 or 7 years, but hey, I'm going to retire in 7 years at age 65, but I don't think I'm going to have to pull from this account for another 5 years after that. Well, now we're not looking at 7 years for the money to grow, we're looking at 12 years. So if you ever want an exact recommendation on whether you should do pre-tax or Roth, always feel free to sit down with me. More than happy to kind of talk through your situation, make those recommendations. But I know, Roth versus pre-tax and talking about taxes at 1 p.m. on a Thursday is what everybody loves doing. But any questions on that, or everything clear as mud? Perfect.
You can still access your account even if you stop working. You can still pay into it.
So you cannot continue to necessarily pay into it. If you stop working, you're going to be able to, depending on what your account balance is, you can leave it there and not have to touch it. You can always also roll it over. But let's say if you go to another job, you can also roll it over into their plan if they offer a plan. So then you can move the money with you, you can take it with you, even if you're no longer working with home instead. And then in retirement, depending on what your balance is, you can take out just a portion of the money, leave the rest in there. You could roll it to IRAs. There's a whole lot of options to do with the account. If you're ever in that situation where you're either not going to be working from home instead or you're retired, give us a call. We can more than happily go through all of those options and figure out what you want to do and what makes the most sense. But we just wrapped up our investing discussion, so now we're going to kind of pivot into, we wrapped up our conversation around contributions. Now we'll talk a little bit about investing. So who all has been paying attention to the current state of the markets? Anybody?
I'll show you some more about it.
Yeah, so how's it doing so far this year?
Not great.
Yeah, not great. So, it was a lot more fun having these presentations when I could come up and say, yeah, markets are up, 30% this year. But unfortunately right now, the markets are down. So what's kind of going on? Well, there's a lot of factors going on. There's high inflation. The Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates to fight that inflation. There's geopolitical uncertainty. All this stuff is going on where the markets are down. But when it comes to your retirement account, what we want to remember is that we are investing for the long term. And so when we're talking about, I know I just mentioned inflation. Sorry, I thought my PowerPoint was broken again, but I forgot I just added another slide in. That was the exact same one. But when we're talking about inflation, we're talking about investing. When there's a lot of market volatility, sometimes people are saying, hey, I just don't want to be in the markets right now. Which is a reasonable thought to have, right? Markets are down 15, 20%. Why would I want to put my money in there if it could lose 15 or 20%? But when we're talking about a long-term average, what we want to remember is, for example, over the last 10 years, the S&P 500 has performed about 12% positive returns on average each year. Over the history of the stock market, the S&P 500 has averaged around 10% a year of positive returns. So when we think investing for retirement, we want to think long-term. And another downside is we're having all our money sitting in cash, and we're on the sidelines, not in the market. Yes, we might be avoiding some market downturns. However, inflation is so high, and inflation averages about 2.5% a year. So current inflation rate, around 7.7%. If we're in a savings account, or if all our money is just sitting in cash, we might be earning at best 0.5%. Well, if prices are going up 7.5% or 7.7%, we're only earning 0.5% in cash. Our purchasing power of our dollar is still going down. So while yes, cash seems great because, hey, I'm not losing money in the markets, we're still at a net loss when we counter inflation. Now, I'm not saying don't have any money in a savings account or cash. We'll talk on an emergency savings account and the importance, but this is just kind of saying that, even if there is volatility, we always want to remember we're in it for the long term. And so, for example, even though 2022, we're down this year, the 3 years before 2022, we had tremendous years, right? We were up 32% in 2019, up 18% in 2020, up 30% in 2021. So after a run like that, it's healthy, normal, and fine to experience kind of a pullback. Like I said, historically, the S&P 500 has returned around 10% a year. As much as I would love to come up here and say, after a run like that, hey, we're suddenly going to start averaging 20% a year, just realistically, that's not going to happen. And so we're going to have years that are well above 10%. We're going to have years that are well below 10%. What we want to remember is that average. And speaking of averages, when we think about that, and when I talk about thinking long-term, here's a little bit perspective of what I mean by that. So this is saying, hey, if we would have put $10,000 in the markets January 1st of 1980, and we would have just left it there, not touched it. Now, through the tech bubble bursting, 2008 financial crisis, we didn't touch it, even though the market was going up and down. We were in there every single day. That $10,000 over the 40-year time period would have grown into over $700,000. Now, if we would have missed just the 5 best days of the market, so 5 days over the course of 40 years, we were out of the markets and we just missed one of those days. Well, now instead of having $700,000, we have $450,000. On the flip side, all the way at the end, if we missed the 50 best days, which sounds like a lot, but hey, that's less than 2 months over 40 years. Now that 10,000, instead of being worth 700 or 458,000, is worth about 62,000. So again, this is just saying that when we're investing, we want to remember long-term strategy, and that there's going to be market volatility, right? This is including the 2008 financial crisis, where stock markets were down crazy amounts. But even with those periods of short-term volatility, when we're in it for the long term and we're getting that average, we're going to end up on top. Now, we'll talk a little bit about kind of how you should be invested, right? Because that's looking at, hey, if we were in the stock market 100%. That's not always the correct allocation for people. So we'll talk through a little bit for figuring out how you should be invested. And really that comes down to time horizon and risk tolerance. And what I mean by time horizon is there's this general rule of thumb called the 130 minus age rule, where that is saying take 130 minus your age, and that should be your asset allocation between stocks and bonds. So what it's saying is, hey, the younger you are, like if you're 30 years old, 130 minus 30, that's 100. You should be, close to 90, 100% in equity, stocks, invest international stocks, because you have time ahead of you, and so the investments are going to be more aggressive. On average, you're going to return more, but there's going to be a lot more volatility and up and down movement. But when you have 30, 40 years before you need the money, you have time to take on that volatility, because if you have a big down year, you've got time to recoup that down year. As we approach retirement, as we get older, it makes sense to be less aggressive, right? Because we might not earn as much, however, there's going to be less volatility and it's going to be a bit of a smoother ride. The other piece is your risk tolerance. So risk tolerance, another way to think of that is, how comfortable are you with potentially taking losses with your money? If you go to the casino, are you there just to grab a drink at the bar and watch other people play, or are you putting money on red 18, putting your entire $100 there, saying I'm going to win it big, right? That's kind of your risk tolerance. Are the markets keeping you up at night? The other thing that I like to say is I think I figured out I had a fairly high risk tolerance when not only did I go skydiving once, but I said, and I'm going to do it again. There's nothing but a little piece of fabric preventing me from plummeting to the ground, but hey, it's fun, right? But once we have your risk tolerance and your time horizon, then we can figure out your asset allocation. And so your asset allocation is going to be, are you conservative? Are you aggressive? Are you somewhere in the middle? And kind of like what we were talking about, when you're aggressive, you're going to average potentially higher returns, right? An aggressive portfolio averages about 9.5%. Conservative is averaging around 5.9%. You're potentially seeing close to 4% more each year on average in the aggressive. But the aggressive portfolio, the best 12 months was up 136%, so your money more than doubled. Worst 12 month is down 61%, so your money was more than cut in half. The conservative portfolio, your best 12 month is up 31%, worst 12 month is down 17%. Again, not great, and you're never guaranteed positive returns when you're investing in the markets. But when you get more conservative, that volatility is going to be much less. It's going to smooth out that ride. So this is going to change too as you enter different phases of life, right? As it should. The other thing too, which regardless if you're conservative or aggressive, the other thing you want to make sure is that you are diversified. And what do I mean by that, right? We've all heard don't put your eggs in one basket. And this is kind of what we're talking about. So this is looking at all the different sectors of the economy. It's looking at their performance year to date and each year for the last 10 years or so. You can see that each color is a different sector. So the green is real estate. There's some years where real estate is the best. There are other years where it's the worst. That dark blue is large growth. It was on a nice run. It's now second to worst so far this year. So we're talking about diversification. We're saying that, hey, we should have our money split up across these different sectors because if we have all our money in one, it's going to be all over the place. But if we spread it out, we're going to get more of that yellow, which is a balanced index, where, hey, it's not ever going to be all the way at the top, but it's also never going to be all the way at the bottom, right? Because we're spreading our money out. So yeah, we're hitting on some stuff that is not going to do very well, but we also have money in what's going to do the overall best as well. Now, in order to get this diversification and the asset allocation within the plan, there are a couple ways that you can be invested. So on the right-hand side, this is asset allocation. So that's kind of what we talked about, where we could sit down and we could do a risk tolerance questionnaire together. We could put you in a portfolio, or you could sit down on your own, and there's 15 to 20 funds that you can pick and choose from. And you can say, hey, I want 40% in this stock fund, 30% in this international, 30% in this bond fund, and you can create a portfolio for yourself, and I can sit down and help create a portfolio for you as well. So that's nice because it can be ultra customized, right? Because we're sitting down talking one-to-one, or you know yourself, and you know your portfolio. but that is a little bit more work, right? Because we got to sit down, we got to put the portfolio together. The other option that you have is what's known as a target date fund. Has anyone heard of target date funds before?
I think it was in a book, I think it was in a book.
Yeah. So a target date fund is going to have a year in the name. So for example, you might see it says Vanguard Target 2050 Fund.
Yeah.
So that year refers to around when you think you're going to be retiring and pulling the money out. So for example, I think actually the latest year is 2070. So that is for anybody who was born around 2005, which makes even me feel old. But how those target date funds work is they're going to take a look at that year and say, hey, based on your date of birth, we think you're going to retire around 2060. So right now, when we're still 38 years away from 2060, it's going to be a little bit more aggressive, right? It's probably going to be very aggressive because there's that long time horizon and there's plenty of time. So it's going to be aggressive. Now, as we approach the year in that name, so as we get closer to 2060, it's going to automatically get more conservative for you. It's going to sell out of the stocks, it's going to buy the bonds, all without you having to do anything.
Okay,
So the target date fund, I always like to say, it's kind of your set it and forget it. It's like putting the investments on your account on cruise control, where I don't have to worry about monitoring the speed and whatnot. So that's the target date fund route. And so if that's the route you want to go with, it's designed to just kind of be one fund that you hold with the year that matches when you're going to start pulling the money out. So again, no option is necessarily better than the other. It's a little bit of your preference, how much work you want to put into it. More than happy to sit down, kind of review both options and make recommendations as well. Any questions on anything so far we've discussed? If not, we're going to be diving into kind of some of those other buckets that we talked about. So, for example, one of those other buckets was paying down debt. So like we said, if your budget allows, we'd always recommend getting the full match. But then one question that we commonly get is, well, should I pay off my debt or should I put more to my 401k? And it really depends on your individual situation and also what type of debt that we have. So there's good debt versus bad debt. Good debt is more of kind of the mentality of it takes money to make money, right? That's your student loans, your business loans, a mortgage, generally that's at a lower interest rate. The other debt is bad debt. So that's money being pulled out of your pocket. That's your high interest rate credit cards, payday loans, consumer loans. When it comes to whether or not we should put more money into the 401k or pay off debt, we're always going to say, hey, look, get the full match if you can. After that, we want to attack the bad debt, that high interest rate debt, and clear that off the books. And then from there, we probably want to take a step back and say, depending on the interest rate of the good debt, it doesn't always make sense to pay it off as quickly as we can, right? Because if we have a very good mortgage rate, and we're down around 3% of interest a year, we could pay off the extra debt at a 3% rate, or we could potentially use that money, invest it for retirement, and earn 5%, 6%, 7%. So not all debt is necessarily bad debt, and we can always talk through a payment strategy if you would like to. Another one of the buckets was an emergency savings fund. So that is something where we like to say that, hey, once the bad debt is taken care of, we're on track for retirement, let's start building up our emergency savings. And so we recommend anywhere from 3 to 9 months away in a liquid cash account for emergencies. Now 3 to 9 months is kind of a wide range, so how do you figure out what's right for you? Well, 3 months is more of, hey, are you single or are you in a multi-income household? Well, if you are, and there's going to be other income, or if there's not a ton of people depending on you, or if it's going to be really easy for you to find another replacement job, if you can no longer work, well, you might be able to get away with 3 months, right? Because there's other income coming in, or you're going to have another job quickly. On the flip side, if it's hard to find a replacement job, or you are the single income provider for an entire household, well, then it probably makes sense to have more saved up for emergencies. Because if something happens and you can't work, well, there are people relying on you, you have more stuff going on. So we always recommend about 3 to 9 months of expenses. Now, the one thing that we don't want to do is use our retirement account as an emergency savings account. A couple reasons why. one, while you are working, it is just limited the amount of money you can get out of the retirement plan. So it's not always going to be necessarily something you can even access. Additionally, if you're under age 59 and a half and you pull money out of a retirement account, you're usually going to be hit with what's known as an early withdrawal penalty of 10%. And that's the IRS basically giving you a slap on the wrist and saying, hey, this is a retirement account that's meant for retirement, and you accessed it early, so in addition to paying taxes, you're also going to have to give us 10% of what you've taken out. You take it out before 59 and a half. And then additionally too, when this retirement accounts, right, we talked about the long-term investing strategy. So if we have to keep pulling from the money out of the account, well, we want to make sure that we're allowing it to invest and grow. So another key piece of your overall financial wellness piece is kind of building that emergency savings. And then finally, those last two buckets, which I won't spend too much time on, real property and home ownership. Just know that we work with mortgage and real estate professionals throughout, Northeast Ohio, and we can always get you to contact and answer any questions you may have around that. And then building wealth outside of retirement. So that is, hey, once we're on track for retirement, we have the emergency savings, debt is under control, right? Now it's time to look at, well, now what do we do with our disposable income? Do we want to potentially help kids go to school, or do we want to buy a vacation home somewhere, right? And so building wealth outside of retirement, we can always help kind of get that on track, figure out what type of account to use, how much we need to save, how should we invest outside of our accounts so that we're building wealth that's not just in our retirement plan. But the other things I'll quickly mention, so here is all my contact information, and then I know I passed around kind of this flyer. So there are two QR codes, one on the bottom left that says landing page underneath it. If you scan that code, it's going to take you to a website that NFP has put together regarding the plan. And on that website, there are going to be resources. We've done a couple webinars. There are going to be links to Newport Group. Those instructions for how to set up your account are going to be on there. And then also there's going to be my contact information on that page as well. There is also a picture of me without a beard there because I had to go to California in December for some training. I say have to, like it was, a really tough assignment, right? But I land and it's December 1st, and I'm talking to some people out there, and yeah, it's just, I'm sorry you had a bad week, it's so cold here. And I'm like, it's 75 degrees, right? I'm coming from Cleveland. So I shaved my beard out of spite. So I could just be like, yeah, it's so hot here, I had to shave my beard, right? Forgetting that they were going to be taking a headshot of me. My boss is I'm the only person, he somehow seemed like 20 years older and younger without a beard. So as incentive to check out the landing page, I give you that story. The other QR code on the bottom right where it says one-on-one financial review. In addition to reaching out to me via phone or email whenever, you can also scan that code. It will take you to a link directly to my calendar. You can pick a date and time that works for you, and it'll send a Zoom or Teams invite to your email, and you can lock in a scheduled time to meet with me whenever works best for you. But that brings me to the end of the presentation. But any other questions for me about anything we talked about? All right.
Right at the beginning, you said the 5-year, you have to be working 5 years.
Yes.
So what if you were at the company for, let's say, 2 or 3 years? Does that change anything?
So like if you've already had 2 or 3 years, yeah, so it should be from your original date of hire.
Okay.
Not necessarily from when you start the account, it's from when your original date of hire.
So what if we need 9 years?
Then you're fully vested and you get to keep everything that all the company match right away.